What does it take to become a financial translator? Coming up. Hello and welcome back to the Freelanceverse, and welcome back to finally a new episode of Specialized on the channel. I'm sorry it's been a while. I wanted to film this before my holiday, but then it fell through due to sickness, etc. So it's a bit later than expected, but today we finally talk about financial translation. As you know, I love this series. I love inviting guests on the channel, and I have 3 very special guests for you today, so stay tuned for that. This video is brought to you by MemoQ. Thank you so much for MemoQ for sponsoring the Specialized series. MemoQ is a tool that helps translators increase their productivity, improve their translation quality, and meeting tight deadlines. If you're interested in their product or their company, make sure to click the link below that leads directly to their webpage. Now let's get on with the video. So welcome back everyone. We are back with another episode of Specialized on my channel. Today I have 3 financial experts in the area of translation on the channel. We have Chris, Ines, and Christèle. Thank you all of you for coming on the channel. I would say you can introduce yourself and tell us who you are. Chris, would you like to start?
Okay, I'm a French to English translator. I was born in the United States. I've lived in Paris for 40 years or more, I think. And I work, I work from French to English. My clients are basically French, some Belgians, some Luxembourgers. But I've worked in specialized translation for pretty much all that time. I was salaried in a bank at one point, and I went freelance 30 years ago, more probably.
Okay, nice. No Swiss amongst your clients?
Occasional, yes.
Okay. One. Ines?
Yeah, I'm Ines and I live in Hamm, Germany, near Dortmund. Mm-hmm. And I'm new in this field of area. I work usually as an accountant in an insurance company. And in January this year, I got freelance translator, and I specialized in finance translations due to my financial background as an accountant. Mm-hmm. And now I'm looking what's the best for me to do, but I think the financial sector is the best. I translate from Spanish and English into German.
Brilliant. And Christèle?
Hi everyone, so I'm Christèle. I'm an English into French translator. I have over 20 years experience, both as in-house and freelance. I started as an in-house working for a boutique translation agency based in Paris, and I've been a freelancer since 2015. Mm-hmm. My clients are mainly based in Europe, whether that's the UK, Luxembourg, Switzerland. Years ago, I had one in Belgium, but that's not the case anymore. And I specialize in corporate communication in the field of investment. So that covers investor relations, asset management, and less often than I'd like, also real estate.
Less often than you like. Okay, interesting. Great, thank you for the introduction. I think it's so interesting we have such a wide field here with lots of experience, only a few months or years of experience. So I think that's gives a great overview for the viewers as well. Christèle just mentioned the areas in financial translation that she is in. How is it for you, Chris? What do you specialize in?
Well, I think that's really pertinent what Christèle said, because financial translation is vast and huge, and there are hundreds of subsectors. So when I started out, I was hired as an in-house translator, very unqualified actually, by a bank to translate financial analysis. So these are reports written by their investment advisory team on which shares to buy and sell. And there was a lot of macroeconomics involved, and then profiles of each French company and so on, and a lot of accounting, which I had to learn on the fly. And I moved out of that when I left the bank to set up on my own. I had some clients who had been in the bank actually before, but I was looking for areas of finance where there was no ceiling on prices, where documents were very important and where you could get like senior people involved, because once they're involved, then the texts you get are much more carefully processed before you get them, and they take you very seriously. And again, the pricing is quite high. And so I do corporate strategy right now, investor relations, quarterly reports. Christèle, I bet you know that about that, where
Yes.
registered listed companies have to publish every quarter on what's going on.
Yeah.
And so that's good, because it gives you a calendar throughout the year. You know when you're going to be really busy on that. The corporate strategy part is often the chairman's speech, chairman's letter, their annual reports, although I do fewer of them now, but now they're corporate social responsibility reports that kind of slide in there. Important texts for companies that are careful about their reputations.
All right. I'm interested always when I do these videos, or the people are watching are very interested. How can they get there, right? So Ines, can you tell us a bit about the backgrounds that you would say are needed for translation, or your own background? What did you study and how did you end up in this sector? You said you worked in insurance before, right?
Yeah, I still work in the accounts department of an insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working as an accountant since 11 years now. So it's my daily business to do the accounts. It makes sense to translate financial texts because I know the terminology of articles or annual reports, for example. And well, I'm still looking how to get into it. So let's see.
Mm-hmm. So you made the decision later on in your career to go into translation. First, you worked in accounting. And how did this come about? What was the decision maker for you?
Well, I lived in Spain for 8 years when I was a child. And then when I got back to Germany, I made a training as a foreign language correspondent. But I needed more practical experience. So I made a training in an office, and then I was hired to work in the accounts department. So at this time, I lost the languages of the translations I wanted to make with my training. Mm-hmm. And now this year I said, well, no, it's what I want to do. And so I combined my background as an accountant and my language experience, and it works for me.
Definitely, yeah. Christèle, how is it for you? What is your background? Did you more focus on languages or more on the accounting or financial sector?
Well, actually, I studied international trade to start with, and I knew when I graduated, I knew I didn't want to work in that field. I loved learning about it. I loved, learning the mechanics and knowing how the world functions, logistics, supply chain, all that kind of stuff. So, but the red thread, as we call it in French, the red line that drew me through all my studies is languages. So I thought, that's not what I want to do, international trade. What else can I do? And someone told me about translation, and I thought, I think that's what I want to do. And because I had this international trade background, I thought maybe economics or something related would be, somewhere where I could play in a way. And I found a master in Paris, and actually it was in apprenticeship. So basically, I had to go and work in a company every other week, and that's where I started, in that boutique financial translation agency. And there you go. I learned on the job like that. And yes, it took years to actually achieve quite a good level of translation and, writing skills and all that kind of stuff. But it was a good way for me to get inside this industry.
The training thing is really important because I think you can start out in different places, but there are lots of training opportunities out there. In financial translation, there's a lot of junk out there too, which is, I think, I'm judgmental about that. But I was fortunate because since I'd been hired by a bank to do financial translation without being particularly qualified, I was able to take night courses at the French Bankers Association. And all employees were expected to do that. You night courses, and then you got a qualification and so on and so forth. So you learned alongside little bankers what the content of what you were translating was. But then I also, once I was freelance, took a bunch of classes that were offered by publications like the Financial Times, had a 2-day course on how financial markets work. And then I filled in the gaps by reading a lot.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, reading is a big thing in financial translation. You have to be aware of what's going on every single day, and you learn so much every day.
That's it. You have to read a lot just to keep up to date what's going on out there on the market and everything else. That's amazing. How much you have to know.
About current events, but that's part of the connection for me that makes it interesting. You're connected to current events all the time. And so it's a given, for example, for what I do, that I read the Financial Times every day, the Wall Street Journal. I get The Economist. I also get, like Christèle says, I work for the rail industry a lot, so I get Railway Gazette International, Urban Mobility, publications like that, where I'm picking up information that relates to financial strategy and business strategy. So you're doing a lot of reading, that's for sure.
Yeah. So this interest in current events and really staying on top, up to date, is very essential in this sector. I can assume.
Yeah, it's essential. You can't survive if you don't know what's going on.
Are there other resources, Christèle, that you're using apart from newspapers?
Well, I also listen to the radio, I listen to podcasts. I attend the Université d'été de la traduction financière, which is organized by Chris Durbin. The session is in July this year. And also, I think if you translate in the financial industry, it's also interesting to be an investor yourself. So I own a couple of stocks, and I also invest in a mutual fund. So I get all this information that comes to me about what's going on, and that's very interesting. Invitation to the annual general meeting. Thank you. So basically, being an investor yourself, what other investors would expect to read when you translate for them. So that's one of the things that you can...
first-hand experience, and how it feels when markets go down and up, right? So you can
you can
be in their shoes. Really interesting. And going back to academic training, when I think back to my studies, most people, I would say, ended up in translation because they are good in languages and not good in numbers, right? Same as me. And so it's kind of an interesting area where you are working in the language industry, but in the numbers sector. So most people try to go the other way, but you decided to combine them. Chris, you mentioned you were hired first by a bank. Was this a conscious effort from you, or was it kind of random that you ended up in this bank?
Well, I was studying at the time, and since I was not particularly wealthy, I had to work while I was studying. So I'd studied for a year in Canada, and then came to France and was looking around, and I was taking some of my courses had to do with translation. It was a business degree, and so I was always looking for jobs. And there was an ad in the language international paper for a part-time translator, and I thought, oh, that looks good. I can study while working part-time, and I know languages. I'm pretty good at languages. I can do this. Was my plan. And so I went into this bank, turned out to be a bank, and they gave me a test, and I did better than the other people, I guess, but the bar was very low. The bar was extremely low. And this is ages, like decades ago. Now I think things are more demanding, but nobody in the bank that I talked to seemed to know why they were translating stuff. So that's not really reassuring, but they said, maybe to look more international. I think nowadays they are translating stuff so that money can be made. I'm pretty sure about that. I think for non-specialists, when they hear financial translation, they think, oh my goodness, that's the balance sheet and the earnings statement and so on. And sometimes it's taught as that in a university context, but that is like really a small part of it. It's useful to know that. And I think Ines, with her knowledge of accounting, you've got a really good niche there to develop.
Yeah.
But I don't translate financial accounts. Even within an annual report, you have different parts. You have the chairman's letter at the beginning, where style is very important and nuance is very important. And then you have the management report, where we're talking about all the good stuff we did this year. And then you have the accounts at the back. And you'll often have different translators doing each part. right? Depending on their specialization, just in that one type of report, right?
I know German financial reports, right? And I know that I would never want to translate them because this is not my area. It's a very specific area and I would get most of it wrong. So I would always turn these jobs down. So how can you become fluent in this financial German language or in any kind of German language?
Yes, you can look, for example, online and read annual reports or balance sheets from bigger companies. I already did this from Spanish companies, banks, such things, just to know the terminology of this special balance sheet, for example, or what's the terminology of the annual report, such things, just to read and to
just
have
practice on the job. Huh?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because
But
I just know the German ones. Sorry.
No, I was going to say there's not just one style of financial report. It depends on who your reader is, right? And so if you're talking to your investors, it's one. If you're talking to the regulatory authorities, it's another. If you're the subject of a tax audit, boy, it's another style altogether. But like the type of work I do has there's a numbers component, but there's also very much a stylistic component. Like Christèle, I'm just referring to you because I think you do the same sort of thing for quarterly results. We go with, it's a 4 or 5 page press release usually that analysts will be looking at in detail. And it's a huge, big, important thing. And we get up to version 19 or 20 where every word is being discussed. And on the day of the board meeting, when the board is finalizing it, my time is reserved so that I can, be next to my phone. And if they want to change many to a lot or something, they can get back to me to check that it's okay.
It's really interesting what you're saying, Chris. And I think maybe younger translators, you should know that listed companies have to publish all their results and figures. So basically you can find anything on the web. That's really good because it's free, it's there. And when it's listed on the Euronext, for example, it's going to be listed, at least for me, in French and in English. So that's easy. You can also, you can always get this information and then analyze it. And then if you're in touch with the direct clients, it's even easier because then you're on the phone with them. You exchange by email as well. And so you can fine tune your translation as it goes. And that's really good.
There is kind of this paradoxical thing going on that I talked to a few people that are very interested in this sector. Newcomers, still students, for example, but they are kind of afraid of going into financial because it seems so important, as you say, right? It's such a big and kind of strict framework, and they don't want to go into it because it seems too hard, too important. Whereas that's exactly as Chris, you said, that's where the money is, right? That's where you can actually build, establish yourself as the expert. So in a way, that's good for financial translators, right? Because probably competition is lower, but it's interesting.
Not sure it's simple. I mean, I'm not sure financial translation is actually more difficult or harder.
That's what I wanted to say right now, because marketing, for example, is for me is much more difficult than financial translation because I don't know about it or the tone. I read it in magazines, for example, or I watch TV and see everything or I hear everything that they talk about, but I could never translate such things.
But how about this? One thing I think about sometimes is if you want to embed with your clients. Mine are direct clients like you, Christèle, and you get to know their vocabulary and what their magic words are, and what the magic word is to this year in 2023, and they're talking about this now or that, and then if you're for example translating a PowerPoint presentation or a speech for the chairman, you see the type of words and that's going to come up again in a report that they'll be submitting to the rating agencies or something. And so you get a sense of what the important words are and what the exact meaning that they put on this word is. And that becomes part of your added value for the company because you're not just skimming over the surface or running something through DeepL and fixing the grammar. You actually know what you can read between the lines about the message they're trying to get out.
Yeah, and you can really add value because you know the client perfectly and you know the market as well. And of course, that comes in time. With years of experience, you can't really do that as a starter. As a starter, I would recommend maybe to hone your style and maybe work on a few different documents and just try and improve and improve and improve. And then when you feel confident enough, go and tap the direct clients market. And when you feel you've got enough confidence to bring something more on the table than just a translation, just maybe cultural differences, things that maybe they didn't notice in the source text and that you can change in the target text to make it more closer to the market, stuff like that. So it takes time. You have to be patient, and you have to work hard and be really aware of what's going on the market, like keep on top of the news and stuff like that. But it pays after a while. Just be patient and keep working. You'll get there.
And I think give yourself some time to get into it, actually, and be prepared to ask questions, because that's part of your added value too.
And you both seamlessly already moved into the advice that you have for the viewers, so that's really nice. Ines, you being the youngest, or also the youngest probably, but the most recently in the field, what advice would you have for people thinking about getting into financial translation?
Don't be anxious. Just try it. Contact your clients or translation agencies, and if they ask you to make a free translation test, do it. It's just a practice for you and to get a feedback how you're doing. I already got bad feedback and good feedback, and I think that's essential. Just keep going on, connect with people of your field, and read a lot. In the background, I make training in Spanish for the financial sector, just about money, just to hear the terminology. I think that's very, very, very essential. And keep going.
Absolutely.
Don't worry.
Don't worry. Just keep going and connect. Chris, what do you have to say to the viewers out there?
The viewers out there, well, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's always a good one. But I think also in this particular area, you have to be very aware of confidentiality issues. Most of my work is covered by a non-disclosure agreement. So if I'm going to use an example in teaching students or something like that, I have to get permission for that. You have to be very careful about oversharing. And I see some translators who, looking for help on some of the forums, they'll give an excerpt of a press release that's under embargo. Like, what? And they will actually, you can almost identify who's going to be publishing this highly confidential information. Don't do that.
Yeah, right? That can lead to a lot of problems, I guess.
Yeah. Because you also, as a translator, you're normally on the list for insider trading. I know I get notices from my clients telling me, quiet period, no, don't deal, right?
Yeah, very, very interesting. And Christèle, to finish off the video, do you have some advice? You already mentioned a lot, but maybe just some words of encouragement.
I think if I had one advice, which what I would have done if I had known that to start with, a word to aspiring translators is if you can maybe take a degree in finance right after your translation studies. I think it's going to give you a fast track to the market and also to direct clients, because not only will have a full overview of the financial markets, the way they work and everything, but also you will also mix with your future clients who can also later on become your ambassadors. So I think maybe it's a good advice.
Well, thank you so much to all of you three. This has been very fruitful. And I hope to all of you at home, you found it interesting as well. I'm going to link all the links to your profiles below, the ones you want to share, so people can reach out if they have more questions, because there's never enough info in 20 minutes, of course, but at least this gives people some inspiration. And I see you next Monday with the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.